One summer, 4 years ago, I sat down to watch Avengers: Age of Ultron with some close friends of mine. I'd been eagerly anticipating that movie since the smash hit that was the first film, and the fact that it also happened to feature one of my favorite comic villains of all time, Ultron, only furthered my excitement for this film. Go ahead and stop me if you've heard of any stories at all similar to Ultron's. In the movie, he's a sentient machine designed originally to protect humanity, but ends up turning on his creators when he declares that extinction is the only out for humans. If you were to ask Arnold Schwarzenegger, he would concur that nothing like that had ever been done in a film before. All joking aside, while the basis of Ultron's story has been done a million times, something about his flawed personality always fascinated me. This movie was easily my most anticipated of that year. Unfortunately, it didn't live up to its admittedly sky-high expectations, but it did place a single question in my mind that would start a series of events that would come to dominate my life through much of high school. See, in the film, during a bout of monologuing, Ultron said something which struck a strange chord with me. When the dust settles, the only thing living in this world will be metal. While it was only a throwaway line in a summer action flick, it got me thinking. Imagine a world past the brink, after catastrophe, so changed and alien that it's nigh unrecognizable. It pushed me into imagining a dystopia, a new dark age. What systems might be put in place by the denizens of the strange new world to preserve some semblance of order? How would life carry on after the fall? How would a teenager grow up in this new society? Seeking answers to these questions, I was inspired to try and start writing about this new universe that was slowly forming in my head. The answer to some of these questions came with surprising ease, like how many years after the apocalypse would this story take place? 11. Why not? Who would be the main hero of this story? Audrey Umbra. Sure. What should I name this story? Made of Shadows. Quick little fun fact. Most fiction writers will attest that half of writing a novel is just pulling names and numbers out of a hat. Of course, there's also the deliberate decision-making, placing Audrey in a world that's both alien and familiar, and having her deal with the fallout of a crisis that nearly ended her world. For context, when disaster struck and left most of Earth uninhabitable, the remaining humans took refuge in the shadow of alien citadels that dot the Earth. Trapped in the land immediately around these citadels and surrounded by a harsh environment home to all sorts of nasty mutated creatures, this new world would feel tight and claustrophobic. Of course, there's also the problem that there aren't nearly as many people as there were before the crisis. This Earth is a lonely one. With these scenarios in place, I felt I'd created the perfect world for Audrey, and now it was time to drop her into it. And here's the other half of being a writer, and every author's worst nightmare, actually writing the story. I try not to think about how much time I spent staring at a blank computer screen as my brain just stopped working, because I'm pretty sure that was 3 years and 11 months of the 4 years I spent writing. I was on the brink, roll credits. I had an idea and an end goal, but I was suddenly stuck, marred by feelings of apprehension, uncertainty, and a fear that what I would end up producing would be a product of subpar quality. The comfort of daydreaming about these ideas, about Audrey's story and the world she lived in, outweighed my willingness to step out of my comfort zone and let myself be vulnerable by putting my stories to word. And that's the danger of the brink, something I became surprisingly acquainted with while I wrote Made of Shadows. The fear of writing something subpar, or of putting my work out to be judged by others, blinded me to a surprising truth, that what comes after the fall is sometimes better than the status quo. Emily Dickinson, one of the most famous and studied poets of all time, didn't share any of her work while she was alive. Her nearly 2,000 poems didn't see the light of day until after she died. At this point in my story, I didn't even have a story yet. I needed to move forward. And sometimes the only way to move forward is to close your eyes, start running, and make the bounding leap into a future you won't see until you get there. And not in a Bird Box manner of speaking, though. Stay safe out there. Life is chock full of brinks, both big and little, good and bad, and some you're pushed over, while others you have to make the conscious choice to either stay or jump. In Audrey's story, she has to make the conscious decision about whether or not to push back against forces that threaten to wipe out her world yet again. While she could ignore these threats and live on in comfort, Audrey chooses to push into the unknown and fight for a world that can be better. And I had to make that choice too. I had to sit down and crank out my book, good parts and bad, but I became better for it. I had to submit my work for the judgment of beta readers and editors. I had to leave my comfort zone time and time again to write a book and share it with the world. It took effort, but the end result was worth it. Made of Shadows, 80,408 words, slightly longer than the first Harry Potter book, which was 76,944 words. At least 500 words written a night for at least 161 nights, and 2 months for an editorial assessment, followed by 7 months of rewriting, then another 2 months for developmental editing, followed by 6 months of even more rewriting, and another month of copy editing, then 3 months designing the cover and formatting the manuscript. And while I can't give you exact times beyond that, altogether, this project has taken 4 years to complete. But I did it. I wrote and published an original manuscript, Made of Shadows, available on Amazon.com on Kindle and paperback. Shameless plug aside, I'm still working. I'm outlining and writing another book and working on a website to go with this one, but it has been such an incredible and gratifying process, worth every single second I've poured into it. And in the end, I managed to answer my question about what a dystopia looks like too. The answer was somewhat surprising, I'll admit. Audrey's world, while not ideal, wasn't a dystopia, because she pushed it to be better. A dystopia isn't a society that's been through disaster. A dystopia is a world that refuses to move forward. A dystopia is a society that can't leave its comfort zone and put in the effort to push for positive change. A dystopia's core isn't collapsed infrastructure or zombies, though those can play a role in one. Dystopia is stagnation. So, while it can be nerve-wracking, I implore you, write that poem you've been thinking about. Take up that obscure hobby you've always been interested in. Reach out to your peers and share your story. Pick up that book and read it. Write that song like you've always meant to. Push yourself to have the discipline and courage to do what you've always wanted to do, whatever that is. Every moment you pour love into your work. Every moment you push yourself out of your comfort zone in hopes of improving yourself. Every late night you spend on your projects, you add good into this world. So, starting today, I encourage you to take that bounding leap and thrive in the unknown. Thank you.